Hello and welcome once again to PolicyBazaar. Now, whenever we talk about investments, one product that always comes to the forefront are ULIPs, and today we are here to talk about them. Now, whenever consumers have been sold ULIPs as investment plans, the pitch has always been to position them as a money-minting proposition. Now, if this is the truth, then why do we as consumers always have this dissonance about the product that we have bought is correct or not? Now, to get to the truth behind this, we once again have with us Yashish Dhaya, co-founder and CEO PolicyBazaar, who would help us understand how ULIPs work and how one should intelligently go about buying them. Welcome to the show, Yashish. First question, what are ULIPs?
ULIPs are essentially instruments which give you a life cover as well as an investment. Now, the investment component of a ULIP is around units. Those units can be equities, they can be debt, they can be cash instruments, but essentially as those units will keep increasing, your investment will keep increasing. And you would also have a life cover along with that, which is going to stay throughout the tenure of the ULIP.
So what you're saying is, it sounds pretty much like a mutual fund, doesn't it then?
In a mutual fund, you can invest, but you don't have a term cover. So it sounds like a mutual fund with a term cover. But there are some very important differences here. There's a lot more flexibility in a ULIP. So you can always top up. Now, when I say top up, you can top up your insurance cover as well, which you cannot do very easily if you have a mutual fund and a term cover. Because assume you're 25 years old and then you get married and then you have children. Now, likelihood is that your term cover should increase as your responsibilities increase. When that happens, you cannot do it with just a term plan. You would have to take a new term plan. Whereas in a ULIP, you can very easily do that. There's one more very important feature. Imagine you were investing 1 lakh rupees a year and you had a 10 lakh rupee term cover. You keep investing this amount, and as 5-6 years pass by, your 1 lakh rupees a year becomes equal to 10 lakhs. At that point, you essentially stop paying for your term cover. Because as your investments have caught on, you don't need the term cover any longer because the cash is already there. This would not happen in a mutual fund and a term cover. In a mutual fund and a term cover, what would happen is you would still keep paying for the 10 lakh of term cover, even though your mutual fund had reached a 10 lakh time value. The other part is it allows you to be disciplined. It's very important. Most of us are not disciplined. It allows you to invest every year. Mutual funds don't always work that way. You could invest now and you could forget about it, etc. So there's discipline. There is the flexibility, and there is the declining term cover, which is very important. Specifically if I'm taking it over a long period of time, 30-year period of time, by the time I'm getting to be 60, I don't need that term cover any longer, and I already have it because my investment's already built up. Which is why it's very different from a pure mutual fund versus mutual fund plus term cover.
So, of course, you explained to us how the ULIPs work, and you've talked about equity-linked ULIPs. Are there any other options in this?
You can have an equity-linked ULIP, you can have a debt-linked ULIP, or you can have a cash-linked ULIP. So every ULIP has 6-7 different fund options, and these fund options have different underlying units. So they can be equities, debt, or cash. And of course, basis which one you're taking, you will have different fund management charges, etc.
And so what about, starting? Do you think it's wise to start early on, start collecting ULIPs?
See, in any investment, it's always wise to start early on. However, if you're going to start early on, the important thing about equities versus debt is if you give it a long period of time, equities give you a higher return without the risk. The risk is only on short periods of time. So if you're looking at a 20-30 year period of time, the equities will always outdo the debt instruments. Hence, when you're investing in a ULIP, what you could do in the early stages, invest in equities, and as time progresses and as you're getting to a stage, suppose you take a 30-year ULIP, you can invest in equity instruments today. When there are 10 years left, 5 years left, you can move that into a debt instrument to make sure that you don't have any last year risk that comes onto your investment.
So what are some of the steps that our viewers can keep in mind when they actually buy a ULIP? How do they go about it? How do they actually choose what is ideal for them?
See, it has to always be objective driven. What is the objective that you're striving for? If the objective is a child who is growing up and 10 years from now is going to be going to university, and you're essentially taking a ULIP to make sure you have money enough for that, Then you take the 10-year ULIP, you start investing today, but it's protected. So assuming you need 20 lakh rupees or 30 lakh rupees, basis that you start investing today, and you also take a term cover, the term portion of it, which is equal to that amount. So that whatever happens to you, that particular financial piece is protected.
And that's an important component.
It's a very important component. In fact, there are many types of ULIPs there. You have ULIP type 1 and type 2, essentially. In the ULIP type 1, what happens, in case a person takes a 30 lakh cover and he's investing 1 lakh per year, and suppose in the third year of that, the person expires. What would happen is the person would get the 30 lakhs there and then. More importantly, there would be a waiver of premium, so he would not have to pay any more premiums for the next 10 years, 20 years, whatever the period is. The company would keep investing for him, and at the end of it, that same financial pool which would have been made if he had survived would be there. So essentially, it's a double payment. In a single type, in a type 1 ULIP, you would have only one of the payments, which is the higher of the sum assured or the fund value. But in a type 2 ULIP, you can actually get both. So depending on what your objectives are, these are instruments which really make sure that if you have an objective and you set the objective, you will actually achieve that objective.
So I guess that's what you're saying is that you must look at the top-ups that you have.
Yes, you have to. You have to not just look at the top-ups. You have to look at the different underlying type of ULIP you're buying, plus the riders that you have. You know, you must have a waiver of premium. You must have a income support. There are all these riders that go along with a ULIP, and you must make sure you have at least considered them and seen if they're important to you or not important to you, and only then bought a ULIP, because these are not simple instruments. These are the complex instruments. If you really wanted to invest in something very simple, then you can go and invest in a mutual fund. But these instruments have underlying objectives which they are designed for, and those objectives are usually around protection of your investment, not only around your investment. And if you are going to buy a ULIP, you must have protection at heart first, and the investment is actually secondary.
Right. And you talked about that ULIPs have front-loaded charges.
Yes.
What does that mean?
You see, there are many types of ULIPs in the market, but essentially let's break them down into two types, which are normally sold. If you have to sell anything, you need an effort. And if you have that effort, that agent or that distributor needs to be paid something. And that payment is usually deducted by the insurance companies in terms of premium allocation charges. These are typically for the first few years. And these charges essentially go to the distributor. Now, companies have come out with online ULIPs. There are at least 3 companies. There is Bajaj, there is Aegon, there is Aviva. These have got very low first-year charges. And here, the customer says, I will come on the internet, I will look for the product, and I will buy it. And hence, the premium allocation charges reduce. There are other charges in ULIPs, which are, so the premium allocation charges are the ones that happen in the beginning of the term of a ULIP, and they don't happen after 2-3 years. After that, they really reduce. Whereas other charges are there. You know, if you're going to invest in a particular fund, there will be fund administration charges. If you are, in general, to run your policy, there is a monthly policy management charge or an administration charge that comes along.
That's between 4 to 6% a year. That's about
no. It would be more to the tune of 1 to 2% a year. In fact, it will be much lower. There are policies which have 0.1% a year or even 0.01% a year. There are policies which have 100 rupees a month. So you can invest 1 lakh and you just pay 100 rupees a month. So it's not a very significant component. Then you have surrender charges. Surrender charges are, if you surrender a policy before its 5 years are due, then you will have certain charges that would come in. Typically, the charges to be very wary of are the premium allocation charges and the surrender charges, because these are the 2 big ones. There are, of course, mortality charges, which are basis the term cover you have taken, and that is fine. Of course, you're taking a term cover, so there will be mortality charges, and that's fine. And there will be some policy administration charges. You can see how much they are, and you have to be comfortable with them. You should be comfortable paying 100 rupees a month if somebody's managing a complex instrument for you, or 10 rupees, whatever it be. But you should look at the premium allocation charges. Sometimes they can be very high. They can be significant, and you got to be cognizant of that.
You talked about online charges
Yes.
of ULIPs, and you talked about the fact that they are lower if you actually go online. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
See, ULIPs were essentially sold before 2010. since 2010, their volumes have really gone down. This is because before 2010, there were very high premium allocation charges, up to 70% in some cases. This was the commission that was paid to agents to distribute those products. What has happened in 2010 is there's a cap on those premiums, and hence they become much lower. And the agent has hence stopped selling these products. What insurance companies have done to counter that is brought out some really low cost products which are only available online. So the agent cannot sell these plans. But these plans actually do not have the payable commissions to the agents, and hence they do not have the premium allocation charges either. So if you took any of these plans, let us say you went to Bajaj and you bought their iGain 3, or you went to Aegon Religare and you bought the iMaximize, or you went to Aviva and you bought the Freedom Life Advantage. These kind of plans have got very low charges, and essentially you could go online and pay for them. So that's but these are only available online. If you go through the agent, you will have certain charges, of course, because the person is providing you some service. He's coming to your house, he's talking to you. That all costs a bit.
Thanks, Ashish. Now that clears up a lot of questions that our viewers have had on ULIPs. But now it's time for a short break. After the break, we'll take your queries. So if you have any investment related questions, do write to us at ask.policybazaar.com or on Facebook /PolicyBazaar India, or if you're using Twitter, the address would be PolicyBazaar_in. Now it's time for a short break. See you soon.